Welcome from Budapest, the live ARCHICAD 22 world premiere event. So, good afternoon, Asia Pacific. Good day, Europe. Good morning, America. Today, we are happy to first show you live in public ARCHICAD 22 and other product innovations that we are just about to be releasing. So, of course, we will show you new features in ARCHICAD 22. But actually, we are going to talk about BIM. So it's going to be a BIM story and the next chapter in the BIM evolution that we would like to cover. If you try and imagine, visualize for yourself BIM, then most probably an image like this comes to mind. A central building model and some views, drawings, and documentations around it, like this on the screen. And this has been a good visualization 10 plus years ago. But I think BIM has been evolving very fast ever since. And we have to change our view of too much focusing on deliverables. So, of course, deliverables, BIM deliverables are mission critical or business critical for you guys, I would say, because still architects are being paid by these. But I think if we want to paint a full BIM picture, covering the whole workflow, then we have to just as well shift our focus a little bit towards the design. And that's what ARCHICAD 22 is focusing pretty much on. And of course, us BIM vendor software people, if we want to provide you with best-in-class design workflows, we have to understand clearly what designs you are delivering these days to the world. So, just as an illustration, we have looked at lots of sources. This is architectural records cover page, some pics by me to give the point that contemporary architecture is having some unique angles. What you can observe on this slide is first that architecture today is not very blobby. These buildings, in terms of the mass of the building, are pretty simple. Probably there's a very good reason for that. Of course, architects work for clients. Clients want to maximize value. So architects more and more try and find new ways of expressing themselves. And if you look at these images, you can see that it's actually the face of the building, the faces of the building. So building facade is a prominent feature in every building that is designed by architects. Maybe a third observation is that the building facades operate with some sort of a pattern. If you look at it from a different distance, these are custom patterns. But if you look a little bit closer, those patterns have some regular characteristics as well. So in ARCHICAD 22, we try to deal with the design challenge of designing facades by dealing with patterns. This illusion on the screen is just a similar pattern, and I think the core of our job is to help you guys grab the core of the pattern, like the atomic piece that's being repeated, and offer you all the workflows that give you the freedom, design freedom you need, and the ease of changing these patterns on a very dynamic way. So what we did in ARCHICAD 22, we looked at the whole workflow of a building life cycle, and we tried to provide you with a robust platform to design the envelope of the building. So we enforce pretty much the core assembly system that deals with building facades or curtain walls, and we extended that in both directions. So we developed brand new workflows to deal with conceptual design, as well as we wanted to implement it in a way that the end result, is still a fully fledged BIM model, which gives you all the deliverables mostly automatically. So we are very excited to show you this tool first in live. For that, I would like to invite on stage the chief designer of this tool, Greg Harry. So Greg, please show us the magic.
Thank you, Ákos. Thank you, Ákos. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Can you hear me? OK. One of the main focuses of ARCHICAD 22 was to revamp our existing curtain wall tool, to turn it into a true facade design tool for architects that supports the entire architectural workflow from early phase design all the way through construction documentation. Let's see a few examples to show what I mean. My first example on the screen is inspired by the ARCHICAD 22 signature building, the Freiburg University Library, designed by ARCHITEKTen. You can see on the screen that my facade is built up of a few glass planes. I would like to design a curtain wall-based facade on this. Let's see what the previous curtain wall solution allowed us to do. Of course, with a lot of customization, you could achieve much more than this, but this is pretty much what came out of the box, simple repetitive patterns. Now, the first thing you may notice with this is that the horizontal lines do not align with each other. This is because this is due to the different inclination of the planes. Now, I could try fixing this manually by calculating the necessary sizes on each of the planes, but that's tedious work, and if something changes in the overall design, I have to do that all over again. That's not what I expect from a true design tool. Let's try to fix this. So I can select my curtain walls, go into the settings, and now the system provides different layouting rules for you, most of which are probably familiar to you from the railing tool. You can specify these sizes using fixed sizes, which is the case in ARCHICAD 21 and which is the case currently. You can let the software figure out the best division that most closely matches the original intended sizes, or you can define the exact number of divisions you need. This is the case currently. I know that I need 7 divisions, so I'm going to select that and zoom out a little. Now, still inspired by the signature building, I would also like to add a little playfulness to this pattern. Instead of having my solid panels corner to corner, I would like them slightly offset to each other with a slight overlap. I can get pretty close to it by making 2 of my columns a bit narrower, adding 2 more of each, and simply switching 2 of these bottom panels, and that's basically as close as I could get automatically with ARCHICAD 21. From here on, I would need to go into edit mode, select the unnecessary frames one by one, and get rid of them. And again, if something changes, I have to do that all over again. Now, in ARCHICAD 22, the pattern preview you see here has been turned into a full-fledged interactive pattern editor where you can directly select, edit, modify, and remove components on the fly. So I can simply select the unnecessary 4 frames I have here and remove them by pressing delete. I can select the other 4 and change their type to match the horizontal frames, and I can simply also select these other 4 and remove them, and by pressing OK, after a short while, the computer recalculates my facades, and you will see that my horizontal lines will truly align with each other because the software calculates the necessary sizes for each of the planes, and my solid panels will have a slight offset instead of the corner-to-corner connection. And it's ready. Thank you. Utilizing the possibility of removing and changing frame types on the system level, I can create lacework-like patterns, such as this one. But what if I want to step outside of the realm of rectangular designs? I can simply go back to my interactive pattern editor, and simply selecting a few of the panels, with a single click, I can add diagonal frames to my pattern as well. Now, again, I can remove unnecessary frames on the fly, so I can simply select 6 of the unnecessary horizontal ones and remove them. And with a few more clicks, I can select the vertical ones too, and with just a few clicks, I have turned my rectangular pattern into a hexagonal one. That is still an associative pattern, so if something changes in the overall curtain wall geometry, this hexagonal pattern will follow that as well automatically. No need for manual customization. Thank you. My next example also utilizes diagonal frames. This is a mid-rise office building. It also utilizes 2 different types of panels, fixed glazing and solid blue panels, as you can see. Now, I would like to add a 3rd panel type. I need some openable windows. Again, up until now, you needed to go into edit mode, select the necessary panels one by one, and change their type as a custom panel. Now, in ARCHICAD 22, I can simply go to my panel settings and press Add, and create a new panel type based on one of my favorites or created from scratch. I'm going to select my curtain wall window here, press OK, and I have created a new panel type in this curtain wall, which now I can go back to my scheme, select a few of the panels, and changing their type, directly utilize in my curtain wall scheme. So just by pressing OK, the new openable windows will appear on my curtain wall facade, and this is still part of the scheme. This is still associative. Now, this building also utilizes 5 different types of frames, as you can see. It has horizontal and vertical main frames, the big black ones. It has horizontal and vertical small divisions between the panels, and it has the wide diagonals. Similarly to frames, you can create similarly to panels, you can create as many frame types as you want. No restrictions in the number of types you can use in your pattern. Now, the diagonal frames here are reflecting the earthquake-proofing structure of the building behind. I would like these diagonal frames to be a bit more emphasized on the facade. Frames, much like walls and beams, have an intersection priority that control how they behave at their junctions. So all I have to do is select my diagonal frames, either in the list or in the preview, raise their intersection priority a little. I can see that the preview shows what I can expect. And after my entire curtain wall is updated, my wide diagonals became the most prominent feature of this curtain wall facade. Utilizing the possibility of removing frames and panels and changing their type directly on the pattern level, I can create frame-only patterns, shading devices, such as this one, without any panels. Or I can create frameless glazing or frameless solid facade designs, still utilizing the diagonal divisions, such as this wavy design. Now, what I have shown you so far is very flexible, but still not exactly how architects would like to design curtain wall facades. What could be a better way for designing a facade than configuring a complex system in a small dialog box? Probably I would like to do that directly in context. And instead of clicking things through in a dialog, I would like to simply design by sketching my ideas directly in 3D or in elevation. I can tell you that in ARCHICAD 22, this is genuinely possible. Let's simulate this process. I had an idea that I sketched onto a piece of paper, scanned it, and placed it as a trace reference on my elevation. The concept is that I would like to turn this leafy pattern into a shading device in front of my glass facade. Now, I would like to turn this into a curtain wall pattern. I can simply select this curtain wall, empty curtain wall here, go into edit mode, and start drawing frames directly onto the facade, wherever I want, no restrictions. So I can start and finish here, and I can do this all day, but I do not want to make you wait while I sketch over this entire pattern, so I have prepared it for you in another view. Let's switch to that, remove the trace reference, so you can see that I already have a bunch of frames prepared here. This is cool, but do I really have to do this all over my entire facade? Do I have to select these frames, multiply them, and again, if something changes, do I have to do that all over again? Luckily, that is not the case. With just a little magic here, I can turn my sketch directly into an interactive pattern. All I have to do now is turn on the pattern visualization, this red box here, grab one of its edges, and start adjusting the pattern extents. And as soon as the pattern extent starts nearing my sketch, you can see that the feedback shows me how the pattern will repeat if I finish it at this point. All I have to do now is find the correct repetition point, press apply, and after 1 or 2 seconds of updating, my leafy sketch has been turned into a true curtain wall pattern on my facade. Now, thank you. I said I wanted a shading device. Now, this is not much for a shading device. This is completely opaque, no transparency whatsoever. Luckily, what I have just created is still an interactively editable pattern. So I can simply go back to my curtain wall settings, go back to the scheme editor, and select a few of the unnecessary panels and remove them. Maybe this one as well, or I think that one. And just by pressing OK, it instantly updates, and now it really will look like a shading device. Let's check this out in 3D as well. When I imported my pattern, my sketch, and drawn over it, I really did not bother with how big my sketch was. Now that I see it in 3D, I would like to make the leaves a little smaller. Also, I would like to ensure that the pattern wraps nicely around these corners. Again, still an editable pattern, so I can go back to my scheme editor, utilize the previously shown division logics, so I can just simply change the sizes of the pattern in both directions to a somewhat smaller size, and switch it to best division in both directions. Now, this will make sure that my leaves will become smaller, about 30% smaller, and also, because it utilizes the best division method, it ensures that the pattern is repeated at an integer number of times on both sides, ensuring that the pattern even wraps nicely around the corners. Now, this method that I've just shown you can be utilized not just for curtain walls, but any kind of modular, repetitive facade patterns. It can be used for metal or stone cladding situations, such as this example here. Or, leaving out the repetition and just using the free frame input, you can create facade ornaments, such as this example here. Now that we have designed wonderful building facades, we also have to make sure that someone will be able to fabricate and construct and assemble them on site. And for that, we will need proper construction documentation. Construction documentation will require a few things from us: intelligent curtain wall components, view-dependent documentation, and a few more small things. Let's check out the intelligent components theme first. In order for the curtain wall to connect properly to its environment, it's not enough that it behaves correctly in the middle of a segment, it also has to behave correctly at its corners. And now I'm going to show you the corner solutions in ARCHICAD 22. Let's check these out in floor plan. Now, what you see on the screen is a standard corner frame. If I change something in the curtain wall overall geometry, its angle will automatically adapt to changes in the neighboring to the bisector of the neighboring segments. This has been available before. But now, we also have standard out-of-the-box solutions for all standard corner situations as well. Let's check out those too. First, you see here is the block corner frame. It might seem obvious, it might seem evident, but it's actually a unique feature in ARCHICAD 22 that the corner frame, for the corner frame, it's not just the position that automatically follows changes in the geometry, but also the geometry of the corner itself. So if I modify something in the overall geometry of the curtain wall, you can see that the corner automatically adapts to all changes. The other most typical corner situation in curtain walls is a corner panel. Now this, in ARCHICAD, is solved by a complex element that is actually composed of a panel and the two frames encompassing it. This allows us to solve a lot of combinations with a single element. So I can just simply select my corner frame. Oops. Wrong settings. Again, wrong settings, just a second. There we are. So I can simply bring up the settings of my corner panel, and switching a few buttons, I can change the frame type, or I can turn it from an insulated thick panel to a thin glazing or thin solid panel on the fly. And again, this is still a smart corner component, so any change in the overall curtain wall geometry is automatically reflected in the corner panel as well. Now, we've got corners. We also need detail level control for documentation. For early stage design, you do not need the full detail of your curtain wall. You probably only want to see some planes and lines representing the entire curtain wall. Now, with ARCHICAD 22, this kind of detail level control is already possible. Notice that the doors and windows are still distinguishable even at this very small detail level from the fixed glazing panels. Now, obviously, this does not only affect 3D and 2D, and this, but 2D as well. And this can also come in very handy at later stages when you already have modeled much of your curtain wall, but still want to go back to the schematic view and change the design without having to bother with accessories and any kind of trinkets that just get in the way. So let's check out how this works in floor plan. This is a schematic view of the curtain wall. This can be used for very early stage floor plan representation of the curtain walls. Now, for building permits, you probably need a little bit more detail, but still not the full detail of all the components. This is possible using the simplified display of all the components. So frames and panels can be displayed with a simple rectangle, and doors and windows with a simplified look very similar to regular doors and windows in walls. For construction documentation, I think you would probably say that you need the full detail of everything. Now, turning on the full detail, however, looks something like this. It might be useful in some cases, but I would say that most of the time it's a little too much. I would have to revise this and say that I need the full detail of most of my components, but I probably do not want my overhead shading devices to show all these little lines in between. Luckily, the detail level can be controlled on a per component type basis, so I can simply set up a view where everything is fully detailed, but my overhead shading devices are still simplified. So I get my nice, clean construction detail look. What we've seen so far is pretty powerful for almost all standard cases. But what happens if the architect wants to utilize custom tailor-made components and use it inside a facade design? One of the standard solutions in ARCHICAD for custom components has been complex profiles for a while now, and now complex profiles have also been introduced into curtain wall components as well. First curtain wall component I'm going to show you is the profile frame. Now, this is very simply created. All you have to do is go into the profile manager, draw whatever you want, as you would do with a regular beam or column, and utilize it as a curtain wall frame. You can get up to one-to-one detail level of a curtain wall if you want to. You probably do not want to include that much of detail in your model, but it's possible if you want to. Now, introducing profiles into curtain wall components also allowed us to support high-end curtain wall systems, such as unitized curtain walls. In unitized curtain walls, the panels and frames, half of the frames, are manufactured together and only assembled on-site for precision. So a single unit is made up of half of the frame and the panel in between. Now this is possible with the introduction of the profiled edge panel. If I select some of these panels and remove the neighbors, you can see that a single panel is basically a glazing panel and half of the frame profile running around it. This is, again, a custom profile that I have drawn in Profile Manager. A small but significant extra feature of these panels is that you can even place a few stickers on them if you want. For example, bird repellent stickers such as this one, and position them wherever you want. Now, bear with me. I'm talking about profiles. Again, it's obvious. We've introduced profiles everywhere we could, even into these stickers, so you can draw your own profiles and utilize it as stickers on your facade, for example, for placing a company logo directly onto your facade as part of the panels. So if you list the panels, you will see these stickers as well. Last but not least, utilizing the same technology that we used for these unitized panels, we've introduced a polygonal window component that can handle any situation where you want a hinged openable window that is not rectangular. I can simply select this panel, switch it to my polygonal window, and as you can see, it automatically turns into a hexagonal window without any further things to do. And if I modify the pattern slightly, so I add 2 extra frames, one here and another one horizontally here, and start removing the unnecessary frames from here, here, and here, and probably remove these 2 as well, you can see that the panel automatically adapts to any kind of geometry it receives, still being a standard window that looks like a window and acts like a window. So if I select it, I can simply grab, I said simply, grab that little hotspot and open the window directly on the facade, just like I could do it with any other window in walls. Thank you. With these improvements, we've seen that we have turned the ARCHICAD 21's curtain wall tool from a modeling/documentation tool into a true design tool that supports architectural workflows from early phase design all the way through construction documentation. And if that weren't enough, we've also updated the ARCHICAD Grasshopper connection So it can handle curtain walls in ARCHICAD 22 as well. So limits are, so the possibilities, design possibilities are truly limitless in ARCHICAD 22. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ákos.
Thank you, György. So it's truly flexible, truly capable, truly powerful, but in many cases, the actual design of the building is not starting in BIM. So there are other software in front of the BIM that needs to be somehow connected to BIM. And you know, these are pretty distinct worlds, so logical match needs to be established. That's what we've done. We did more than a year ago with our Grasshopper Rhino ARCHICAD Live connection. The essence of it you can see on this picture. So instead of just a one-time handover of data, a live link is established, and the design can be controlled from the algorithmic design software. So what you can see is that with fancy or clever Grasshopper scripts, you can control your BIM data. That's very powerful. But I think it would be even more powerful if the whole workflow would be working from the other way around as well, meaning that some few people deal with the Grasshopper script, and the majority of the team can just truly use BIM as a design environment. And for that, we had to do some magic, and we had to make Grasshopper capable of reading into the depths of BIM data. In other words, breaking up the BIM data logic. And we call this workflow deconstruct. In the style of deconstructivism is my slide. And this allows you to do magic through inside the BIM environment too. So without further explanation, let's just see how it works. For that, I would like to invite Ákos Karockai, my colleague, on stage. Ákos?
Thank you, Ákos. Now, as you are probably aware, that we recently released the 2.0 version of the Grasshopper ARCHICAD Live connection. And it was a huge milestone in the deep integration of the conceptual and the BIM worlds, because we introduced a brand new workflow, and that is the deconstruct, as Ákos mentioned. And it allows us to link our Grasshopper codes to not just individual points or lines in ARCHICAD, but to take entire BIM elements and deconstruct them into their basic geometry, their metadata, or even their attributes, and use that information to drive the Grasshopper design logic. So it may sound like science fiction for you, so let me show a simple example from the early design phase. Now we have a zoning study of a building. We have some shopping and retail areas on the bottom, some offices, and some residential functions on the top. Modeled, especially, it's very important that these are all modeled with ARCHICAD zones. And it's very effective if we do this in ARCHICAD in the early design phase, because this way we can keep an eye out on the measurements of the building. We can see the gross floor plan areas for the different functions. We can see the environment and the nature of the building. And by deconstructing these zones in Grasshopper, we can create such nice data visualizations that you can see in the bottom left corner, where we can show the different proportions of the different functions and the overall areas for the functions. Now, what is more important than that is that we can take these ARCHICAD zones and use Grasshopper to, based on these zones, generate additional structures like columns and slabs directly into the ARCHICAD project in a matter of seconds. And we have another advantage, is that if we modify the core BIM data, so if we manually modify some of these zones, all these elements will be updated automatically. So let me change some geometry here. Let's extend these office zones in the building a little bit. And also, let's change the metadata in them. So let's give the client a couple more retail and shopping stories. And I can, with one click, I can send these changes that I made manually to Grasshopper, and all the geometries are automatically, all the slabs and columns are automatically updated in the ARCHICAD project. It's pretty cool, isn't it? All right, let's give these guys in the office buildings a couple of balconies. So let me retract this office zone. So we have a nice view to the city. And again, I can send the changes. And I would like you to note that the unnecessary columns are automatically eliminated from the geometry without having to touch anything else but the zones. And finally, let me do a more complex change to the building by modifying some of the residential zones and retracting them to create another balcony here. And please note that even though I modified two ARCHICAD zones, only one single slab has been modified. And this demonstrates that through Grasshopper, we can create such complex design logics that take the whole building into account, not just a one-to-one connection between the zone and the slab. And obviously, since we are in a native ARCHICAD environment, we can see these changes in the documentation again automatically. All the schedules, the geometry, and the data visualization has been updated since the original design. Well, Grasshopper ARCHICAD connection can handle more than just simple slabs and columns. It can handle the revamped ARCHICAD 22's curtain walls as well, more complex assembly elements. And with this, we can create such nice designs as this one, all automatically. Now, the deconstruct workflow can handle much more than that, but let's switch topics and let's see how Grasshopper can boost the design workflow regarding building facades. From György, you could see that how easy it is to create quite complex and a large variety of different patterns. And let's see how we can benefit by involving Grasshopper into the process. I have a building facade here, and I generated this facade from Grasshopper, even though I could have done the pattern in ARCHICAD in a matter of minutes, because this is a repetitive pattern. And ARCHICAD out of the box has one limitation. It can only handle patterns that are repetitive. But with Grasshopper, it's a very handy tool to boost this kind of design workflow. So on the left-hand side, you can see Rhino and Grasshopper, where I can apply a gradually changing panel distribution onto the facade of the building. With one slider, I can control the proportion of the two panel types, and with another slider, I can control the randomization of these panels. So I can go from fully randomized to a quite narrow transition zone. And if I'm satisfied with the result on Rhino and Grasshopper side, I can synchronize these geometries into ARCHICAD with a single click as curtain wall elements. And as it's updating, I would like you to know that we are working with single elements and entirely native BIM elements that we can document in 2D and 3D views as well. Pretty cool, isn't it? OK, so you could see that we can handle different panel distributions very well with Grasshopper. But what if I would like to control the system in its entirety, including the curtain wall frames as well? Well, for that, let me show you a more complex version of the same facade. In this case, the facade's frames and panels are controlled by a so-called attractor point. And if I move this attractor point, the whole density is changing according to it. So if I put it on the top of the building, there will be denser panels. And if I move it to the bottom, then it will give me another geometry. And again, I can synchronize these geometries into ARCHICAD with a couple of clicks. And this way, we can handle any kind of extraordinary pattern on building facades. Now, after these examples, I would like to step out of the realm of large, flat building facades. And I would like to highlight that how good of a companion Grasshopper is when it comes to double curved surfaces and the handlement of double curved surfaces. And in Rhino and Grasshopper, it's very easy to, for example, change the smoothness of the surface or the number of the panels, planar panels. We can change the structure's height a little bit, or we can even change the form altogether by adding new waves to the building. Again, if we are satisfied with the results in Rhino and Grasshopper side, we can take these geometries, and with a single click, we can transform them to native BIM elements. And with such approximation, we can virtually design any shape or form of a building shell this way. Pretty impressive, right? All right, so from the previous examples, I think it's quite obvious that how powerful the deep integration between Grasshopper and ARCHICAD. And to finish it up, I would like to play a guessing game with you. And I'm not sure if you're aware of the fact that in Grasshopper, it's pretty easy to take an image and use it as an input for different operations. So that's exactly what we did. We took an image and turned it into a full-fledged native BIM curtain wall in ARCHICAD. And I would invite you to guess what was on the original picture. Now, in this form, it's pretty raw, isn't it? So let me help you by increasing the resolution of the image a little bit. So we have so-called more pixels on the facade. Any guesses, maybe? Stormtrooper is close, but not yet. And to just reflect to Victor's presentation. Now, I hope I could prove you that how powerful and strong this connection between the two software is. And I'm sure it's very useful for not just high-profile architectural practices, but for every architect can value its true potential. Thank you, and back to Ákos.
Thanks very much. I hope you are convinced that design is now not limited in our realm, in our ecosystem. But if we return to our BIM story and think a little bit a higher level about BIM, then BIM is actually a full, in an ideal way, a full digital copy of the physical world. You know, this way can BIM fulfill its ultimate goal, providing the designers, the constructors, and operators full control about the physical built environment. So how to achieve this? Switching back to our image, of course, you can try and increase the level of detail of your model. You can try and model the finite detail of your building. And in some cases, it's necessary. But just as well, a good strategy is combining the modeling detailness with the richness of the information put into the BIM database. So the combination of these two provide you with the necessary level of development, LOD, and this is what we try to support in ARCHICAD 22 with different strategies. So first off, let me talk a little bit about modeling. So the inception of this feature is coming from Japan. Japanese architects are pretty well focused about details. What you can see on the image is 3D document, let's say, of a column in a room with some tiling, finishes on the column and the walls. So Japanese architects design already in the design phase the size of the columns in a way that they will end up perfectly with tiling at the end of the day. And in order for them to do that, they have a unique concept called fukashi, which is the additional concrete layer on each column in the building to make up for perfect alignment of tiling. Now, of course, you can model that already today in ARCHICAD. The challenge is that in a typical building, there are hundreds of similarly looking but a little different of these situations. So in ARCHICAD 22, we introduced a brand new way of modeling these situations with parametric custom profiles. More about that live. Now, talking about information, of course, there is a set of information coming directly from the model. But combining that, so existing data, with human logic would provide you with the possibility to actually describe the whole building in its entirety. So this is what we do with ARCHICAD 22's expression-based properties, creating actually new data in the BIM database, making it a true relational database. Now, increasing the detailness both in terms of model and information gives a pretty huge challenge of software in terms of performance. This chart shows the average increase of the number of elements in the BIM data provided by our customers, and you can see that in the past 5 years, it is almost doubled. Now, dealing with large amounts of data requires raw performance as well as a unique approach to user experience. I would say that the performance of software is a combination of these two, and we try to focus on this responsiveness part in ARCHICAD 22. Now, where is the place where you experience responsiveness the most often? It's throughout navigation, scrolling, zooming, panning your floor plan sections, elevations, drawings, and any views in the software. Now, same problem exists in the outside world as well. So map software deals with this problem by tiling up the data and assigning pieces of that data to the various processor cores to calculate and assembles at the end of the day. We did that in ARCHICAD 2, but in a very innovative, unique way with a patented technology. So what we did is we introduced a little bit of a machine learning to BIM. ARCHICAD, starting with 22, starts with the standard tiling of the views in the software. But the result is being analyzed, and of course, not the amount of information in each tile is not the same. And the total time depends on the slowest, tile to be calculated. So the software does analyze the result and tries to adjust the tiling live, real time, while the architect navigates in the software and tries to learn the behaviors of the architect as well as the peculiarities of the actual project. So by learning that, we can pretty much optimize the user experience, the responsiveness of the software throughout the world. So, in this session, Enikő will show you all these live. Enikő, please come on stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ákos. Hello, everyone. So, well, as you heard from Ákos' introduction, the heart and the soul of the proper and smooth BIM workflow is a proper model. So, in ARCHICAD 22, let me continue the story. We started in the curtain wall demonstration with applying profiles with the custom parametric profiles in ARCHICAD. On the screen, now you see some profiles. In ARCHICAD, it's fairly easy to model like walls, beams, and columns with profiles since a long time. But some are parametric and others are custom. So what we did so far in the design is that we chose that was the closest solution to what we wanted to model. But unfortunately, life is not that easy, because at the end, we always ended up with different variations of the same profile that were all custom with sometimes just slightly different changes. This is a very time-consuming process to create and also to maintain and update. So from ARCHICAD 22, we can do all of these with one single profile. Do you want to see that? OK, let me prove it to you. So we will be able to model all of these different variations with just one single profile. Let's start with this I-beam cross-section and create our new parametric profile. First, I duplicate it and give it another name. Let's call it flexible, because from now on, it will be available in all sizes for our beams. The next thing I have to do is adding profile modifiers. These modifiers are responsible for the automatic and smart connections between the parts, the edges of this building material field that represent the cross-section. So I can type any name here in this field, or I can also choose from the already available modifier definitions from my project. This allows also BIM managers to keep the project consistency while reducing the number of modifiers in the project. So well, when I'm done with this, I can start adding the edges. This is a very easy and visual process. So I just click on the edges. I want to have the logical connection and place the modifier. Later on, I can add also as many edges and directions as I like to my modifier to define the smart behavior. Let's continue with the height here. And also, let's take care of the sub-elements. I can also link these edges to smart associative as well as static points if necessary. So with these some clicks, we basically finished with the profile definition for our steel component. It was easy, right? Any one of you could do that immediately. So now, what happens if we want to add other components into our cross-section? This is absolutely possible in ARCHICAD. I can add as many components that are represented by building material fields, as many I like, because there is no limitation in ARCHICAD. So let's add a structural concrete. Let's add some offset to that. And let me add another part that's going to be a plaster scan and on top. You may think that this process is a little bit time-consuming or maybe boring, but trust me, if we compare this speed and this productivity with the case when you have to define all these separate profile definitions one by one, trust me, this is a lot more faster. So again, let's return to this list and add additional profile modifiers. For the sake of this example, I'm going to handle the concrete and the plaster edges together, but we would be also able to create separate dedicated modifiers for each edge if we want to. So again, let's add the edges, and now I'm going to link these into the points of the steel structure. So with some simple clicks, we can create the smart components of our complex custom profile. One more left, and we're done. OK, we finished. Let's save it and try it in the real situation. Please also note that I didn't have to take care of the intersections between the building materials, because ARCHICAD will do it for me automatically. So let's return to the original view and now apply our profile into my selected cross-section. Here is the one, and you can see it immediately how it appears. So now, what you see is that it has edges indicated with blue lines. These are the edges that are controlled by the modifier. So while I start dragging them, the profile will immediately change its shape. So I can adjust the concrete covering and the plaster together. But sometimes these changes have to be done numerically because, for example, the standard steel profiles come in manufacturer sizes. So instead of manual adjustment, I can also set up these values with numbers, because these profile modifiers are also available in the settings dialog box as well as in the info box here. Moreover, I can also eliminate some structures from my profile by setting up the profile modifier to 0. So this way, I can even use these complex cross-sections to create such cross-sections that can model both this complex as well as this parametric and still keep their parametric behavior. So let's see this structure in its natural environment, for example, on a floor plan view. We have the copy of these columns here placed. So some are freestanding, others are almost blended into the surrounding structures. And thanks to the building material priorities, all connecting structures are created and set up automatically in ARCHICAD, so I don't have to deal with the layers of the walls and the profiles. We can also visualize this data and retrieve this data because we implemented profile modifiers in an integrated way of ARCHICAD. And the best way of doing so is a schedule. So I created a little schedule that shows us the value of the profile modifiers as well as the preview of the profile. I can also have access to these values here. So if I want to modify them, I can do it here in the schedule view as well. Moreover, ARCHICAD is very capable of visualizing data. We can also apply graphical overrides to see the values in our model, for example, for design checking. So let's say that there is a minimum of 40 millimeters concrete covering is necessary to make this steel structure fireproof. What can I do? For example, I can set up graphical override that checks exactly this. So let's apply this. And you can see immediately that those elements that do not meet the requirement are highlighted. And of course, we can also go to 2D or 3D to show and see that element in its context and check whether we need to do any changes. I showed you the parametric capabilities on columns, but of course, this works exactly the same with beams and walls as well. And let me go to the other important example, that is partition walls. Why we picked partition walls? Because these are very complex structures with multiple skins, as well as sometimes the skin heights have to be different depending on the zone functionalities of both sides of the walls. So frame thicknesses, soundproof, insulation, covering, and so on, can be different. So the good news now is that you can model all these different walls with just, again, one smart parametric profile that you create for the partition walls. Let's take a look at this profile definition. So from now on, this is how a smart profile for partition walls looks like in ARCHICAD. And you can see the profile modifiers highlighted while I'm clicking through them. Of course, I know that you guys are very creative, so you are not going to use this profile modifier feature just for very scientific or precise modeling, but also for general modeling and creative examples. So to illustrate this, we also created and furnished this reception area for demo building. And you have to say that all these elements that we placed are made of smart profiles with profile modifiers. Just let me show their capabilities. For example, this one here, if I start dragging the side, because I can set up the direction of the movement, can behave like this. And also, if we take a look at this bench here, we're also capable of doing some adjustments. For example, I can turn this bench into a flat one if I like to, or there is another one that is a kind of double acting, so I can easily switch the direction of the seating if I like to. Thank you. So far so good. ARCHICAD is now capable of modeling even the last screw on the model if we like to. But what if there is some parts what we cannot model, or it's not worth modeling, like metadata type of things? Of course, ARCHICAD 22 also contains a brand new improvement that is called the expression-based properties. So let me switch the subject now to explain what are these. On the screen now, you see the curtain wall shading system, what we created previously. And the question may pop up, OK, it's beautiful, but what about the transparency capabilities? How I can check how transparent it is? This is the question where expression-based properties can come to place and be very handy. We implemented it in an integrated way. So instead of doing mathematical calculations in some spreadsheet kind of view, let's go to the property manager to explore this. It is very simple to create such an expression. What we have to do, we create a new property first. And here is a new option here, expression. If I click on it, an expression editor appears. Here in the expression editor, I can just simply start typing my expression if I like to. And I also have the option to choose from all available properties from my model. So I can start just simply typing. So I just wanted to make sure that you see. And I can also add the other part. And then because I'd like to have a percentage-like result at the end, I can also multiply it. Well, beside of typing the mathematical functions, I have also the option to choose from the predefined options here in ARCHICAD. You can find the operations, basic mathematical operations, logical functions, trigonometrical functions, and so on, ready to use in the list. So I just click multiply and multiply it by 100. And that's done. All I have to do is that I have to assign this property to the relevant element. So if I go to this editor, I have to find my elements that are classified as shading system. And it is done. So now my property is ready to be used. Here I have another schedule, because schedules are the best things to visualize our data, actually, which shows the transparency rate immediately calculated from my curtain wall. Further on, I can also use the data for validating my design. So let's say that I'd like to check the sunlight conditions behind these shading curtain walls. What can I do? I can also use this data that comes from the expression in another expression that evaluates the lighting conditions of my zones. So this one here uses the result of the other expression and will give me text-like feedback whether they meet the requirement or they don't. Let's see that schedule as well. The schedule is calculated automatically based on the current model conditions. And here you can see the results. So here I have immediate feedback on that there are some zones that don't have enough sunlight with this curtain wall shading system conditions. So I have to refine my curtain wall. Expressions are also good for creating other type of data from model retrieved data. And to illustrate this, I'm going to use another example where we're going to calculate occupancy rates. We have this office building, and let's try to calculate how many workstations I can place in the offices. I'm pretty certain, again, that from now on you could also do it on your own, but let me show you the trick. So we have a constant value that symbolizes the area necessary for one workstation. And also please note that ARCHICAD 22 is capable of handling also measurement units. So this here, the data type will be area. So again, let's create this expression together and calculate how many workstations can fit in one room. Now, because it's going to be a little bit more advanced expression, let's start with the expression itself. We're going to use the round down function for this calculation. In this case, ARCHICAD also shows us placeholders. So it helps us what type of data we have to include into our expression to make it right. What we need to calculate, it is not too complicated. It's going to be the calculated area of the zones divided by the number we set up as a requirement. And because we expect, of course, integer number of people in the room, let's set the precision to 0. Again, don't forget to assign this property to the right classification. So we'll assign them to the incubator spaces for now. I press OK, and let's see the result, OK? We can retrieve again this information anywhere in our project. Zone stamps, labels, schedules, like this. So I can see immediately, story by story, how many workstations I can fit into my building. ARCHICAD is also good in visualizing data. Data might sound boring, but with some visualization, it can be also cool and good looking. So I also created graphical override to show how these workstation numbers look in the different rooms. As more blue is the color, as less workstations fit, but still it's a little less than what I expected. So let's change the available area. Because let's say that we will build this office incubator building for startups, and people in startups need less space, or they can live with less space, let's say. OK, so I reduced the area from 8 to 5. ARCHICAD recalculates, and you can see immediately how the color coding changes accordingly to that. I also emphasize that we can retrieve information from ARCHICAD in many different ways. But there is one important trick from now on you can do with expressions. Because expressions are also capable of handling different multiple sequences. So to illustrate this, I created an expression, and you can see that it has many lines here. These lines of functions refer to the properties and parameters of different element types of ARCHICAD. And by using such an expression in our labels, for example, we can create an all-doing label. So watch my hand, what happens. I don't change anything. If I click on the door, it shows the relevant information. If I click on the beam, it shows totally different type of information with different type of formatting without changing any settings. If I click on the column, again, different, and also the wall. And this is just one single expression applied in one single ARCHICAD label. And last but not least, it's about performance. Performance is very important. And by our product strategy, ARCHICAD 22 must be the fastest BIM application available on the market. Every year we do important enhancements to make it possible, and this year we focused on those actions that happened in projected views, like sections, elevations, floor plans, 2D interactions, panning, zooming, and so on. We spend most of our lives in that views anyway, right? So, on the other hand, it's very hard to demonstrate performance. So for the sake of the example, we use this DWG map of London we used for testing purposes. And you have to know that the number of lines here in this drawing is in the millions range. So let's see what happens if I start zooming and panning. I zoom in and start panning. And please watch what happens. Basically, it's smooth. So performance is a very subjective thing. Normally, response time is measured in fractions of seconds, but these are additive. And if we can reduce these fractions of seconds, we can improve the overall performance. That also means that you will not lose the design flow because of idle times in ARCHICAD anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aniku. Back to our BIM story. I have to emphasize you that all the heavy duty, all the heavy work that you put in as designers is just really half of the story, half of the coin. So we don't do anything good to the greater good of the world if we just enhance the authoring part of the BIM workflow. We have to also deal with the data consumption part of the equation as well. So in other words, data access to BIM data put into the model. OK, now there are certain challenges there. So people who would need to get access to this data are not proficient in BIM software. They don't even have BIM software. Sometimes they don't even have a computer. They just have a laptop or an iPad or a mobile phone. So we have to tailor workflows for the needs of this specific group, where we identified basically 3 main challenges. So we have to create tailor-made user experiences to make their life as easy as possible. Also, we have to provide accessibility to data limitless, both in terms of hardware or platform or the form, as well as we have to be able to deal with these larger BIM databases on very small spec computer devices such as a phone. To show you that live, I would like to invite my colleague Gábor Kovács-Palko on stage, but bear with me, he will be showing you some future technologies as well. So Gábor.
Thank you. Do you remember what Victor said in the morning about BIMX? Well, forget it, because that gives you the best user experience now. Right, when architects prepare for a meeting with a customer, they plan everything ahead. They want to make sure that all the important topics are covered during the meeting. They want to make sure that all the aspects of the design are properly explained to the customer. BIMX provides an excellent tool for this workflow. It's called favorites. You can create the favorites in advance, and then when you are on a meeting, you can recall them easily one by one. In fact, you can even create these favorites in ARCHICAD if you wish. Now, creating the favorites it's a simple task. On a meeting, you can select them, tap, and it activates the related view. And then go for the next one. You see, it does the job exactly how we expect, but it does require a few extra steps, extra taps. Can we do it better? Of course we can. BIMX presentation view turns the BIMX application into a whole new user experience, into a photo or picture book of your model. You can activate it by this button, and then with a single tap, you can jump and forth between the different views you created previously. And it's not just a picture book, it's still BIMX, so you can access all the information embedded into the elements in the model, what you created in ARCHICAD. And it's also very important that the transitions between the different views are explaining the customer what they see on the screen. So you see, we are down to a single tap. But can we do it better? Can we go down to 0 tap? Challenge accepted. Let me show you the automatic play mode of the presentation mode. If you tap it, then all the slides are looped one by one, so you can focus even more on the customer. Now this is, I guess you have a lot of ideas already how to utilize this feature. Here is mine. Let's set up a screen in the reception area of your office where you are expecting your customers. Maybe a bit smaller than this, but still something where you can hook up BIMX and then switch on the autoplay mode. While the customers are waiting for you when they arrive, they will see the animation on the screen. If they have a question, you can grab the application, the mobile device, tap it, even interrupt the presentation, explain the design concept for them. Or, since it is BIMX, you can even hand it over to them because they can experience it themselves. It's so easy. Everything is so easy when you are right next to the customer. But what happens if you are not? Well, GRAPHISOFT provides a service, a cloud service, where you can transfer the model to the customers using the transfer site. You publish the model from ARCHICAD up to the transfer site. It sends an email to the customer, taps the link, boom, there is the model. Nothing could be simpler. So, wait. What happens if the customer reads the email on his computer? What happens then? Then you have to go through the hassle to tell them that, oh, please open it on your mobile device and then tap the link and it will work. But wait, But if the customer doesn't even have a mobile device, what can we do? In order to provide universal access to the BIM data and the information in the BIMX application, BIMX model, we have created a BIMX which runs in a browser environment. Let me show it to you. So the customer taps the link in the email. He gets to the transfer site, and then tapping the preview will take him to this site. Here, you can see it can be navigated immediately. If I switch it to full screen, you will see it better from the back row as well. But it works the same way as BIMX works. Furthermore, you have access to the 2D documentation as well. So you can recall them, and then you can zoom in and out the same way as in BIMX. It's very powerful. But I can hear you say that, yes, Graphisoft, we like the transfer site, but can we have it in our own website? Am I correct? All right. So here it is. What you see here is an example website where models hosted on the transfer site are embedded into this view. You can embed any number of sites and then any number of models, and the customers can view it right there. You have seen that BIMX is a very powerful tool. Either you are right next to the customer, he is far away, either he is using a mobile device or using a desktop computer, but it has a small issue. It has a small issue with the size of the models. After a certain size, BIMX is not able to handle the models. In fact, it's not the problem of the BIMX application itself. Mobile devices and web browsers are not designed to handle large amount of data in the memory. Graphisoft has always been very innovative in this area when we had to solve complex calculation algorithms on limited device. And luckily, it's still true even today. Let me introduce you BIMX Lab. And in BIMX Lab, let me introduce you to a huge project. It's a holiday resort in Croatia, and it covers an entire peninsula. And the technology, what happens in the background, I will explain while it's loading, is called memory streaming. Practically, it means that only those elements are visible in the view and loaded into the memory, which are visible in the view. If something is behind you or something is hidden behind different elements, it's not loaded. So if you just watch carefully, when I turn around, you see that elements are loading dynamically in the background. If I turn back, again. And I want to emphasize this is a 2 GB iPad, so it's not the latest and greatest device what we can have. With the help of this technology, I can make a bold claim that no ARCHICAD model is too big for BIMX anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabor. Let's switch back to the story of BIM. You could see already 2 applications, ARCHICAD and BIMX. And I guess you are having some feeling that something is missing. And of course, we have a third product, which we call BIM Cloud as well. But BIM Cloud behaves pretty similar to the roots of trees. If it works well, then it's invisible for most of the users. In the past 12 months, we have been working pretty strongly on improving BIM Cloud as a platform, as an infrastructure to you guys. We have introduced a whole lot of improvements, both in terms of performance, stability, and services to BIM Cloud operators to do their job much easier. Maybe just one functionality that's about to be released now with ARCHICAD 22 BIM Cloud is Reservation Assistant. This will appear, or actually not appear, but be experienced by all the users using Teamwork in ARCHICAD. it will allow users to actually start working in a teamwork environment, and the infrastructure in the background will sort out reservation of elements they are working on. So this is what we are just about to be rolling out on the market. ARCHICAD 22 will be available for download beginning of next week. The BIMX Lab version, which is more of a technology preview at this current moment, will be made public in the middle of next month, so that you can also experience with that. And based upon the feedback, market feedback, we will finalize BIMX Lab towards the end of the year. So this has been ARCHICAD 22. Very excited to give it to you guys. To finish up this session, we created a movie that shows the test of the limitation of ARCHICAD, which is pretty high. So we try to always model very extreme, challenging buildings with our BIM tool. So is it possible to be done fully BIM way? Let me show you the video, and thank you for your attention.